Welcome to another episode of Game and Went. I'm your host, Craig Kober, and I'm joined this week by a very good friend of mine, and he is here to help get the ball rolling. The Pokeball, that is.
And just like the title of your podcast, the audio we recorded came and went.
Oh my god, dude. So Chris and I recorded what I thought was an absolutely dynamite episode, 3 weeks ago now?
Yeah, it was just about a month ago.
It was a very long time ago, and this is something I'm still new at, and so I don't know if it was my fault or Audacity, but we lost all of my audio, and now we're here to try to recapture the magic in a Premiere Ball, hopefully.
Ha! Premiere balls.
You know I'm only ever trying to use Premiere Balls.
I'm all about those heavy balls.
I gotta ask you to stop that right there, my man. Very good, dude. Oh my god. Chris, I already know the answer to this question, but what have you been playing lately, my dude?
You know, I'm so glad you asked. It's been Pokemon Shield for the past month. I'm at 170 hours now.
Jesus, buddy. That's so many hours. I've had it for almost as long, and I think I'm only at a ripe 60.
Dude, it's so good. I have been spending so much time the past week trying to hatch a shiny Heatmore using the Masuda method, and failing. I filled up all of my PC boxes that were left with Heatmore, and then got to the point where I deleted 2 of those boxes, surprise trade 2 more, and I've been releasing Heatmore ever since, and I've just lost track of how many I've done, but it's been bad.
This is not only a great story about Chris's recent gaming history, but also a PSA. If you find a lot more Heatmore in the wild, that's why you know they're there.
Because they're just all running from me, apparently.
Yeah, the Heatmore garbage pin's overflowing, and just Chris is releasing them now into the ecosystem, where they have become the apex predator. Watch out.
Yes.
Well, I knew that I was bringing the right person on for this podcast episode because we're not going to be talking about Pokemon Sword and Shield. We're going to be talking about Pokemon Red and Blue, where it all began. And my man, I think that you have to be considered an expert at this point, right?
I mean, I think with the amount of hours I've put into all the Pokemon games, I think I'm justifiably an expert in Pokemon.
I would give so much to get data on how many hours of your life you have spent playing all the Pokemon games over 25 plus years it's been out.
I'm trying to think. The earliest data I can remember, I played Ruby version for 530 hours.
Holy shit.
And then pretty much every Pokemon game that's come out since then, I average about 300 hours.
I mean, that's a lot of hours. That's a lot of hours.
It's a pretty good amount. I mean, even Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness, I put somewhere between 100 and 200 hours in because I was, trying to grind for all the ribbons and stuff.
No, of course. You have to have your ribbons.
Got to.
Got to catch all the ribbons. Well, Jesus. We are tremendous Pokemon fans, Chris and and I definitely think that Pokemon's one of those games that defined my taste. I have spent so many hours playing Pokemon myself, maybe not quite as many as Chris, but I would be remiss if one of the first few episodes of this podcast did not talk about one of my favorite game series of all times, and I knew that Chris would share my enthusiasm about that.
Digimon, right? That's what we're here to talk about?
Digimon, absolutely. The America's sweetheart.
Sweet. Yes.
So, Pokemon, for the sad few who don't know, is a RPG that came out originally for the Game Boy, the regular Game Boy system, actually, not the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Pocket. But it was developed by a new company at the time called Game Freak, which is a subsidiary of the Pokemon Company now, and it was published by Nintendo. Directed by Satoshi Tajiri and produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, the legend himself, with incredible art by Ken Sugimori. Now, the game was released in the United States in September of 1998, so I would have been just turned 6 years old.
And I was the tender age of 8.
Man, you old man.
You young boy.
I remember when I first bought, I didn't buy anything when I was that old, but when my folks bought me Pokemon Red version, because I had to have Red version, had Charizard on the cover. He looked so much cooler than all of the other Pokemon, despite the fact that I didn't actually pick Charizard for my starting Pokemon. but I asked for Pokemon Red version, and then I loved it so much that I asked my folks to get me Pokemon Blue version too, and I think I got it for Christmas that year. And I was just absolutely shocked and tremendously disappointed that it was just like the same game. At that age, I could not understand the differences. So I remember calling my mom and be like, "Mom, it's the same game. Why?"
Oh, they suckered you hard. The marketing machine won.
I mean, what if my not giving them that money meant the franchise died? Did you ever think about that, Chris?
You know, I can safely say that I've never once thought about that, Craig.
God, who could blame you? Now, how old were you? You said you were 8, but what were you doing when you were playing Pokemon for the first time?
I don't remember like what else was going on in my life, but I can tell you the reason why I put Pokemon Red version on my Christmas wish list.
Why was that?
I was smitten, you could say, by the first Pokemon commercial. It was a live-action commercial where this bus driver is on a bus and all these 2D animated Pokemon hop on. And then he gets out of the bus and presses a button, and like this big old thing comes down and crushes the bus. And then when the thing lifts up, then it's just a Game Boy left, and you see all the Pokemon in there, and they're like trying to get out, but he caught them. And I remember thinking that I needed that game really bad.
Dude, I remember that.
Yeah, like thinking back on it, that's like kind of brutal.
I mean, you don't think putting a bunch
just
of like
crushing these poor defenseless monsters,
right? Just tossing a bunch of monsters in like an industrial-sized trash compactor.
Yeah.
Man, marketing has changed quite a bit in the years since, hasn't it?
A little bit. And there were 2 Pokemon that I remember from that commercial that I instantly knew I needed. And I didn't know their names because I just, saw the commercial. But they're Pokemon that eventually I would learn to be Electabuzz and Charizard. And I remember as a kid, little 8-year-old me, I would look out at the sky and think, maybe if I look long enough, I'll see a Charizard and I can like catch it. Because the dude did in the trailer. And then I was like, that Pokemon that eventually I learned was Electabuzz, like, I bet you I can catch that too. So I hatched a brilliant plan. I'm a pretty smart guy. So I took a cardboard box, put it in the flower bed in our front yard growing up, and I put a stick under it. Because I figured, eventually that Electabuzz, he's going to, want to check out, like, hey, what's under that box?
What's under the box?
And then boom.
You didn't, like, bait it or anything? You just put a box?
Zero bait, just a box.
Oh, man.
It was a really interesting box.
It must have been. And as we all know, Electabuzzes are just attracted to all boxes.
Oh, it's in the Pokedex, there's so much electricity in cardboard boxes.
What's the funniest part is that the Electabuzz actually prefers to be in your PC box than in your party.
That's it right there. I was ahead of the curve.
Man, Chris always coming up with those next level strats. I think what I loved about that ad is that it was very quintessential of like the 90s. I want to call it an attitude, because everything in the 90s was like a little edgy for no real good reason. I'm sure you remember how like the protagonist even looked in all of the like game manual art. He had his hat turned backwards when it was time to get serious, and he had these like very sharp, angry, triangular eyes. And it's like, so did a lot of the Pokemon. The Pokemon definitely looked a lot more fearsome, I would say, back then.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. If you look at the Ken Sugimura artwork from Red and Blue, you can see the changes even between Red and Blue and then onwards to Yellow. Some Pokemon like Machoke, for example, his like 3 crests on the top of his head. In Red and Blue, his back sprite, they actually went down like almost like a mullet.
Oh, really?
And then in Yellow and onwards, they got moved up to just sitting on the top of the head.
Interesting. I actually didn't know that.
Well, Poke knowledge bomb for you there.
Hashtag Poke Trivia. Tweet at us with hashtag Poke Trivia if you have any more Poke Trivia.
Please send Craig your hashtags.
Oh my god. Honestly, I think I'd love that. Oh, let me share with you a bit of Poke Trivia I actually just recently discovered in between the time that we recorded the last episode and then this one. Did you know that there was cut content in the original Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow games that would have allowed you to battle Professor Oak?
Yes.
Dude, I watched a video of somebody who dug into it and unlocked that battle, and not only does he have the most powerful team in the game, which I think is absolutely rad, but the battle theme is brilliant. It recombines the main theme of Pokemon and adds battle tones and this victorious melody to it. It's incredible.
Didn't you battle him in the Cinnabar Mansion?
Oak?
Because I think there was a way where you could hack it so you could battle his team, and I thought it was in the Cinnabar Mansion. I never did it myself, but I read about it at some point.
Yeah, I never did it either. I'm sure that one of my friends who had was it a Game Shark?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure one of my friends who had a Game Shark who was, battling against Professor Oak with their level 150 Mew that they got using the missing no glitch, which is also iconic.
Oh yeah.
But to take things back to Route 1, so to say, Pokemon is a game about a player character who is the ripe age of 10? Was it 10?
Yeah, right before puberty.
Right before puberty. So you, as a prepubescent boy, set out from Pallet Town at the ripe age of 10 after a dangerous experience with wild Pokemon in the tall grass. Gifted with a special Pokemon of your own, you set out to collect the 8 gym badges, defeat the nefarious Team Rocket, outshine your rival, and complete your quest to become the Pokemon champion, collecting as many of the little monsters as you can along the way. What a simple but also wonderful story that I think they told.
And just like us at ages 6 and 8, before we had armpit hair.
God, to take it back to then, eh? So,
oh, how times have changed.
You remember as a kid how everybody was playing Pokemon, right? There has not been a gaming boom since Pokemon the same way, has there?
I honestly think the closest that it ever came to that level of everybody doing it was Pokemon Go. But even then, it was totally different. I mean, at our school, they straight up banned Game Boys.
No way.
Because during recess, everybody would be playing their Game Boys, and we would have the link cables out. And the teachers were like, well, we can't have students just sitting outside playing Game Boy. So they just banned it. You couldn't bring it to school anymore.
Jeez. Totalitarian.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, everybody was playing Pokemon. And I've never experienced a game like that. I mean, I was playing with kids back then who they're not even gamers nowadays, but they just kind of happened to be caught in the craze right around when everybody was doing it.
I think that speaks to just how incredible that the game was. I mean, to talk about an iconoclast, something that absolutely defines its genre. There may have been games similar to Pokemon beforehand, but there has been no game like Pokemon before, or if I can be so bold, since. I think that the monster capturing genre, the monster capturing RPG, has never been outdone by any Pokemon game. They always top the genre as far as ingenuity, performance. Can you think of any examples of the monster catching genre that outshine Pokemon?
The only example I can think of off the top of my head that certainly wasn't better than Pokemon, but they had some ingenuity, at least early on, was the Monster Rancher games. Because you could, on your PS1, I believe, you could take any compact disc, whether it's, a CD, a game, whatever, and if you put that into your PS1, then it scanned it, and then, a monster would be inside of it. And that was cool, because it was a very unique thing. It was very different from Pokemon, but people didn't really get into that franchise nearly as much as Pokemon. And I think part of it is, the Ken Sugimori designs. Part of it is the fact that because it came out for Game Boy, it was this big epic game that you could play on the bus or, go over to a friend's house. It wasn't like you had to be locked down to your television.
It's a very good point. The fact that you could take it with you, this grand adventure, that's absolutely next level. And also, you mentioned link cables earlier. The ability to match up with your friends and battle against each other's teams and trade Pokemon, that was something we'd never seen before.
It was totally revolutionary.
Absolutely, and I want to be so bold as to say that it defined multiplayer games even now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, we the multiplayer games, that was really its first sort of like trans console game, I think.
Yeah, no, and I remember the story. I forget which person at Game Freak said it. Maybe it's probably Masuda, but I'm thinking about it right. But that the idea behind trading with the link cable came from the concept of ants and how ants like walk across a line. It was like, oh, how can we like trade bugs? We should like create this thing called a link cable.
I think that's absolutely inspired. And they kind of put that in the game. When you transfer Pokemon from one console to another, there was like that wonderful little tube, and it would suck up your Pokeball, and you kind of like see it like moving through the tube on the way to your friend's Game Boy.
Right.
God damn, what a just incredibly cute game Pokemon turned out to be. Now,
Oh yeah.
talk me through a little bit of as much you can remember of your first Pokemon experience. Who did you start with? What Pokemon stuck with you through your team? How did you end up conquering all of the gym leaders? Tell me something about that.
Well, my very first memory of actually cracking open Pokemon was so I got it Christmas Day, Pokemon Red, and I immediately took out the hefty instruction manual that
Oh,
came with it.
it was so excellent.
Oh, it was just it's a work of art, straight up. It's so big, and it was filled with brand new artwork, and it was really more of like a small book than an instruction manual. It was so thick.
I remember too. There were all these little like tips and tricks filled through it, and drawings. The Ken Sugimori art was like drawn in there as if it was like a safari guide or a nature guide.
Hmm. Yeah, it was like it struck me almost like a journal that had a bunch of different findings in it, and that's actually like how I got to my starter Pokemon. Is just like you. I like Charizard a lot, and that's why I wanted red version because Charizard was on the cover. But when I was reading the instruction manual, it explicitly says that if this is your first time playing, you should pick Bulbasaur. So I was like, well, this is my first time playing, so I need to pick Bulbasaur. So I did. I went with Bulbasaur instead of Charmander just because it was supposed to be easier. And I came to really love Venusaur. And to this day, Venusaur is my favorite out of all the starters.
I think I have to back you up on that, man. So I don't remember my reasoning why, but I also started with Bulbasaur my first time around, and I love all of the starter Pokemon's finals except for maybe Charizard, because let's be honest, Charizard's a little overplayed these days. But Venusaur was awesome. I found it was the first one that wasn't bipedal. It had this huge flower on its back. I loved its typing and moveset. It's like a really good Pokemon. Very lovable.
I really like the Ken Sugimori artwork that I think it was on the back of the instruction manual. There was three Pokemon trainers. It was Red, Gary, and maybe it was Green or somebody else, but they each had a hand placed on one of the final forms of the three starters. And Red had his hand on Venusaur, and I thought that was it was just such a cool, iconic pose, and I could like totally see 8-year-old me like putting my hand on my big beefy Venusaur,
Hell
ready to
yeah.
conquer the world.
You know what? I actually have a picture of it up right now. And the player character, Red, his hand is on Bulbasaur. The Gary, the blue character, has his hand on Charmander. And then there's a girl who has her hand on a Squirtle. And what was interesting about that is that you didn't get a chance to play as or like against any girl characters in the original game.
Yeah, so she, if I'm thinking of the right image, can you send it to me so I can look at it?
So you see the image, right?
Yeah, so what was really cool about that character, you don't see her face, but she became canonized in the Pokemon Adventures manga where she had the name Green. And then flash forward, 20-ish years later, And green was actually a character in last year's Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. So that Ken Sugimori artwork finally went full circle, and now she's actually in a Pokemon game.
That's awesome. It's very cool to see that come back so many years later, especially so that, all the little girls and adult girls who want that representation can have a character that better resembles themselves.
Exactly.
So what other Pokemon did you bring along with you on your adventure? Do you remember any of your favorites from back in the day? Besides Electabuzz and Charizard, of course.
Yeah, so some of my other favorites, Golduck, Aerodactyl, Zapdos, Electabuzz, Kangaskhan, and my all-time favorite Pokemon, Rhydon.
Yuck to all of those, Chris. Why do we have such different taste?
That's what I was about to say, baby. That's what's so beautiful about Pokemon is that, people can have such wildly different tastes. You like the little cute boys, and I like the big old beefy dudes.
You like the big beefers for sure. Pokemon Gen 1 had so many, absolutely incredible designs that I feel like just didn't really land as far as, the power goes. Do you remember Sandslash?
Oh, absolutely.
Sandslash had, one of the best designs I've ever seen. It was based on, I think, a pangolin, that little shielded armadillo thing. It had this incredible design, and I feel like that was a really crappy Pokemon.
Yeah, it's not very good.
But then you also had absolutely bonkers designs on Pokemon like Execute and Exeggutor. It's eggs that turns into a coconut tree, but it absolutely fucked.
And Exeggutor was one of the strongest Pokemon in Gen 1.
Yeah, that's what
largely
I'm saying.
Because it was a psychic type, and there was just no checks for psychic Pokemon.
Isn't that absolutely buck wild though? You have Pokemon like Sandslash who are sleek and ninja like, and then you just get big dumb tree with eggs for a head, and it's the absolute end of all days.
And I'll be real, dude. Everybody was playing Pokemon. I didn't know a single person who used Exeggutor.
Well, I mean, back in the day before we started being tier whores, we had different tastes, but I can at least say that you had such a diverse amount of Pokemon to choose from that you never felt like your team didn't really represent you. Even back before I understood type advantages and stuff like that, I still just wanted to play with my favorite Pokemon.
Yeah, totally agreed. And this is something that I didn't get to bring up on the original podcast, but I actually, when Pokemon Stadium came out, I had a tournament at my house.
Did you
where
really?
we had, dude, straight up, we had 30, 40 people there, all friends of mine, and it was called the Chris Cup. And we all played in Stadium, with our teams from Pokemon Red, and the winner got a trophy. My mom legit went to a trophy store and had a trophy made for the Chris Cup. And it was so much fun seeing all my friends playing with their Pokemon on the big screen TV. And like you said, everybody had such wildly different teams because we were at such a young age where we weren't really thinking about which Pokemon is superior to the rest of them. For the most part, people were just using their favorites.
That's amazing. Everything about this story is just amazing, my dude. I wish you'd still do that. Why don't we do this?
Well, because I don't have nearly as many friends who live around me who play Pokemon, or else I totally would. Because, man,
very fair.
That's so much fun.
Dude, that sounds awesome. That sounds like something that would absolutely make a kid's day. That'd be a great birthday party idea.
It was unbelievably fun. And I remember I was probably 9 or 10 at that point, I was super salty because I barely lost in grand finals to my buddy Michael. Shout outs to Michael Pickering. I'll name drop his last name too. Michael used Game Shark right before the tournament to hack himself a Mew, and he had Mew and Mewtwo in his team, and even back then everybody knew Mew and Mewtwo were the best.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't want to use them because that's lame. And he cleaned my clock. I'm pretty sure his Mewtwo took out my Kangaskhan in one hit with Psychic. So he took the trophy, and then years later, when Pokemon Stadium 2 was out, we had another tournament. It was a little bit smaller at a buddy's house, the Chris Cup 2.
The naming could not have gotten better.
It came down to it was his Ampharos against my Tyranitar. And I told him, because I was like, oh man, if he just hits me with Thunderbolt, he's going to take me out because my Tyranitar had low enough health, like I was done, and I was slower than he was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember telling him, like, Michael, man, I just, I want to level with you here. Tyranitar is a rock and ground type, so you don't want to use Thunderbolt on me. Oh, thanks. And so he used Slam, which of course I lied. Tyranitar is a rock and dark type, so his Slam did no damage, and I took him out with Crunch, and
Oh,
then I won.
shit.
I got my revenge for the original Chris Cup.
Chris, you sneaky son of a bitch. But you know
And
what?
that was the last time in my life I ever lied.
Yeah.
No,
Maybe.
that's a lie. That's a lie.
That's nuts. I mean, honestly, all is fair. You gotta hack the game to get Mew, so I think your mislead was at least a little more honest than that. But geez, dude, that's wonderful. Can we talk a little bit about the absolute boss journey that you go on through Kanto, where you start from like this tiny little town and then eventually travel across like an entire continent, and like you battle these great gym leaders and meet these great characters, and then you have to beat Team Rocket, dude. That's something that I find a little bit lacking about Pokemon games lately, is like the lack of a strong central antagonist that you encounter over the course of the game.
Yeah, I think part of that is because for the longest time, Pokemon games kind of just did that, where you start off and at first it's just, go get the gym badges, and then comes in the central team, and they have goons and a leader, and they all tend to use, dark types, poison types, in the case of Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, fire types and water types, but generally like evil, more sinister looking Pokemon. And I think they start getting criticism for having the same narrative structure. And so with some of the more recent games, you see them, playing things a little bit looser in terms of not just sticking to their narrative trappings, if you will. And I think that's like, it kind of works like in Sword and Shield, but then, I think for a lot of us, like you and I, who played with, ever since Red and Blue, that there's just a certain nostalgia that comes with those narrative tropes.
There's something very satisfying, I think, about building up to a victory over a strong central antagonist. And in the case of Pokemon Red and Blue, I think they kind of got it the best the first time they did it. So over the course of the game, you encounter in various scenarios the evil Team Rocket. And like you said, they've got like Coughing and Ekans and Arbok and Wheezing. So they have like the dirty, gross, evil Pokemon. And I'm literally in my office right now making hand quotes to emphasize that. But you had this build-up because you'd see them in Mount Moon, and then in the Celadon like secret base under the casino, and then at the Silphco tower. And you kept hearing about, oh, Giovanni, 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 while you tore their plans asunder. And then finally, in one of, I think, the best moments in all of the Pokemon games, you arrive at the final gym at the near end of your journey thinking, all right, it's time to face the final gym leader. I wonder who it could possibly be. And it's Giovanni.
That was such a fantastic reveal. And I think especially, considering the fact that we were so young when we did it, it was a mind-blowing plot twist like we had never seen before.
Yeah, and they set it up so well because you start the game and the first gym you actually pass by is the Viridian City gym, but it's abandoned or it's unoccupied when you see it the first time.
And what I also think is really cool about fighting Giovanni is you fight him as the Viridian City gym leader after you've beaten him, at the final battle as the leader of Team Rocket. And when you face him, he uses almost a completely different team. Instead of, specializing in his team specializing in poison types, he has Rhydon, which he never had before. I think it's Rhyhorn, Rhydon, Nidoqueen, Nidoking. Yeah, I forget where I was going with that.
I mean, really. I promise you that I won't remember half as many of these teams as you. But it also speaks to kind of how they set up these critical battles in the first generation when there might not have been quite as many types to represent, or not as many Pokemon to represent those types. He's got Rhydon and Rhyhorn. I think we talked in the last recording about Lance he's like the dragon type trainer, but all he's got is like 3 Dragonites.
Right. Yeah, he's got the Dragonair, 2 Dragonites, or 2 Dragonite, I should say, because I gotta drop the correct Poke grammar on the podcast for that hashtag knowledge. And then he's got the Gyarados and Aerodactyl because there's no dragons.
Right? And they, I guess, at least resemble dragons.
Now I'm thinking about it, and this is just now coming to me, and I think this is freaking amazing. It's so cool that Giovanni has Nidoking and Nidoqueen on his gym team, because since they are poison and ground types, they are the marriage of Team Rocket, poison-based, and Viridian City Gym, ground-based.
Yeah, and I also think it almost represents his sort of ideology, too. I think he thinks he's like a king or something higher than everybody else, and so he has Pokemon that represent that, and it's just, they nailed the typing by making the poison ground type that sort of grand, kingly and queenly Pokemon.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Nidoking really, if Giovanni could be a Pokemon, it would be Nidoking, because he looks cool and badass, and, as long as you hit him first, you could take him out in one hit.
There's something to say about, I think, the thought that went into that design. And that's also part of the reason why I feel such a nostalgic attachment to Pokemon Red and Blue. Not to mention the excellent music paired with like all of these moments by Junichi Masuda. When we started the episode, everybody got to hear the intro to Pokemon, the iconic intro, which I believe is your favorite song, isn't it, Chris?
It is, because that song is in so many different, it's in Pokemon movies, it's in Pokemon series. You've probably heard it in the Super Smash Brothers series, even if you've never played a Pokemon game before. And that original song, when the intro cinematic first boots up, for me, it just got me in the right state of mind that I'm about to play an epic as hell game, and I can't wait to have an amazing battle like, this Nidorino and Gengar are having.
There's something incredibly iconic about it. And recently playing through Pokemon Sword and Shield, which has, I would say, maybe the best music in the series to date, even when you fight the final champion in Pokemon Sword and Shield, there are so many elements of that original song in that final battle music.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely woven into the music.
It's become part of the DNA of the Pokemon genre, that plucking intro. Dun, 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 dun. It's remarkable. And another one that I want to talk about, one of my favorites, if not my favorite, is the theme when you fight against Blue. You find out that your rival, who's been just bullying you and teasing you this whole game, actually defeats the Pokemon League before you and usurps your title. Well, he doesn't usurp you, but he gets there first. He achieves your dream before you have a chance to. And I'm going to edit it in right now. I'm going to edit it in right now, mid-sentence. When you fight against Blue, it just starts off this very panicked, anxious intro, and then all of a sudden it gets very epic. There's like a couple notes that play, there's a pause, note, pause, and then you have the most panicked battle music yet. And I just have to imagine that represents what your player character is feeling, experiencing this final challenge, this bully that they've dealt with their whole life.
Well, and I think what's so cool with the fact that, Gary becomes the champ before you is he beats every gym before you do. If you go up and, select like the statues that are at the beginning of all of the gyms, it says, successful challengers, Gary, every single time. So he's ahead of you your whole journey. And when you go through Elite Four, there's no mention of Gary. There's no sight of Gary at all. And then after you beat Lance, you're like, okay, I did it. That's Elite Four. That's it. And then comes the reveal that, nope, your rival still did it before you did.
God, I'm getting a little like tense and angry thinking about it even now. How amazing that they laid out the groundwork like that throughout the entire story. Because I noticed that, but I never thought too much about it. That's absolutely incredible, and I love it. And his team is the first team in the game, really, that's not just centralized on one type. Everybody, especially the gym leaders in the Elite Four, they all specialize in one type. But your rival has this incredibly well-rounded team of Pokemon that he has caught going along the same routes that you have. You've seen at least the pre-evolved form of most of his Pokemon across your journey.
Oh yeah, and his Pokemon are all so strong too. I have vivid memories of hating his Alakazam as an 8-year-old.
Yes. Dude, you've just taken me back. It was so powerful. I mean, we've talked about how psychic Pokemon are just absolutely imbalanced in Pokemon Red and Blue, and his Alakazam was definitely the forefront of that.
And it didn't help that Alakazam is one of the fastest Pokemon in Gen 1 too, so the only way you could take him out in one hit was honestly like if you had a Pokemon that was over leveled. And back in the day, I didn't really think about grinding that much. I'm just playing the game as best I can, and then I just go into Elite Four. So, oh hell yeah, he beat my ass the first time I played him.
You aren't alone. I remember grinding out the Elite Four and just trying to brute force my way through time and time again until eventually I finally did it on like my 15th try. Because that's what you did as a kid. We didn't have any better strategies.
Oh, I lost so much money. I mean, I just imagine like you go up against your rival, he beats your ass, and then he takes your lunch money basically, and then you go back and do it again.
Oh, God. They almost hit a little too close to home on that one, didn't they? The entire game was just this wonderful experience that I think really hits all of like the nodes for childhood whimsy. You've got these really cool monsters. You have all this freedom that a kid your age didn't have. You gain the respect of adults, and it just kind of like checks every little childhood fantasy box, doesn't it?
Yes. Okay,
I'm
totally just messing with you.
All.
I'm completely messing with you. I was just like, I wonder if I just wait a long time and just say yes. Like, can it just totally mess with Craig? And I think I did my job to perfection.
Chris, I'm properly messed with.
But to answer your question more appropriately, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think that's enough of that. You want to wrap things up, my man?
Sure, dude.
Cool. Well, everybody, I think we've done a little bit of too much talking about Pokemon. We're going on, I guess, collected time now, about 2 hours talking about Pokemon, and I think that's enough to burn anybody out. So, my good man,
Hey, it's
Chris,
never enough to burn me out.
Well, I know you could talk about Pokemon literally nonstop forever and always, but unfortunately, as adults, we have other responsibilities.
Like sleep.
Like sleep. So I want to thank you, my man, for making the time to record this with me a second time. It's just an absolute joy, and I always enjoy talking about Pokemon and hanging out with you, my dude.
Of course, buddy. It's good to come out here and talk Pokemon with my Pokeboy, and hopefully this time Audacity doesn't shit the bed.
I'm going to do the best I can with it. But I'm also looking forward to battling you soon with my trained up Pokemon Sword team.
Dude, I'm so ready. I now have 19 Pokemon raised to level 100, either, bred properly or hyper trained. It's going to be so good.
Hell yeah, man. The Clash of the Gods.
As they say on the streets.
Yes, as they say on the streets. Well, thank you so much, my man. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Very excited to be here doing another episode of Game & Went. If you don't already, please do give us a follow on @GameandWent on Twitter. And as of now, you should be able to find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and SoundCloud. So please give respective reviews or ratings or follows to those platforms depending on your favorite. And don't be afraid to give us some feedback, too. I'm always looking for ways to improve this. So thank you.
Minimum of 5 stars. 5 stars only.
I only accept 5 stars, but I might glance at a 4-star. If it's under 4 stars, you can fuck right off. Thanks, everybody, and as always, don't forget to save. Hey everyone, this is Craig. I wanted to thank you again so much for listening. I know this episode took quite a little while to come out. I have recently made some life decisions that are going to probably put the podcast on hold for about a month, so I might not expect to see an episode in February, but I will promise I will do my best to get one up in March, if not the end of February. I don't want to make any promises, but thanks so much for listening. Thank you for your patience. And I wanted to give a shout out to Chris on his birthday today. As of right now, it is his birthday. So happy birthday to my very good buddy Chris. And another announcement, I have finally, after about 15 battles, beaten him once in a Pokemon match. So that's it. Thanks again. Bye.